Buongiorno ragazzi. Today's topic is very important, so I'm going to try and introduce it very slowly and carefully. The topic is il verbo essere, or the verb essere. Let me start by reminding you that we have talked about two actually of several big groups of words that exist in English and also in Italian, and one of those is nouns, right? What are nouns? Nouns are basically the names we give to the things that exist in the world, all kinds of things, living beings, places, ideas, objects, right? All of those are nouns. So let's look at a sentence and let's locate the noun in there. The professor teaches, right? Which is the word that names a thing or living being or place or idea? Well, it's right here, right? Professor is a living being. So that is our noun. Okay? I hope you also recall, even though I'm not going to show it in the slide, that there is another type of word, the article, and the is our article here, right? But today we're going to start studying yet another group of words, verbs. Okay? Where is the verb in this sentence? The same sentence. The professor teaches. Well, I just told you that the is an article, so it can be that one. And I just told you that professor is the noun. So the noun can't be a verb, it can't be that one. We're left with only one alternative, and that's our verb, teaches. Here's the verb, right? But what are verbs exactly? So I have told you that grammar classifies words depending on their function in a sentence, on what they do in a sentence, right? So this group, verbs, needs to have some sort of thing that it does, right? Well, verbs talk about actions. That's what they do. They don't talk about things or objects or ideas, right? They talk about things being done, right? Actions. What do I mean? Let me give you some examples. To study, right? That is an action, right? Studying is an action. To play, another action. To talk, to fly, to read, or I don't know, to jump, to run, to hide. All of those are actions and all of those are verbs. Okay? Let's look at some more sentences in English and let's try and find the verb. For example, the woman drives the car. Where is the action here? Well, woman is a living being, car is an object, but none of those talks about something being done, right? And the is just an article. So drives would be a verb, and if you think about it, that is definitely an action. Driving is an action. Here's our verb. Okay? Second sentence, the man sleeps. Well, sleeping is certainly a very passive action, but it's an action nonetheless. It's something you do, right? And if you don't do it, well, you'll face the consequences, right? So the man sleeps. Sleeps is our verb. A third example, the clock rings in the morning. Slightly longer, which would be the word that talks about an action here. The clock is just an object, the morning is a moment in time, but it's not like we're saying that anything is happening, so nothing's being done. Where is our word that talks about an action? Well, right here, right? That's what the clock does. It rings. So here's our verb. One last example. The coffee is good. On the surface, it might seem that nothing's happening here, that nothing is being done. But if you think about it, being, existing, being in this world is an action in itself. That's our verb, is. Okay? So that is what verbs do. They talk about actions. Now, let's think about a peculiar phenomenon that happens with verbs for a minute. Let's think about this question. Why do you say the professor reads, for example? But if you say that if you change the professor for the students, you know you need to change the verb as well. You would not say the students reads, you would say the students read, right? So something changed there at the end of the verb. First I had an S, then I took it away. Why? Well, the answer is basically that the one doing the action changed. First it was the professor. So reads matched the professor. But then I changed the professor for the students, and since I changed the one doing the action, I had also the need to change the verb itself. Okay? So in grammar, we called subjects of an action the person, people, animals, or things, or what have you that are doing an action in a sentence. Those are the subjects of that action. And what I just showed you is that verbs have to match their subject, right? That depending on the subject, they can change slightly so that they fit whoever it is that is doing the action. Making those changes, changing a verb so that it matches its subject, is an action in itself that is called conjugating. That is what conjugating is. Okay? Changing a verb so that it matches its subject. Now, there is a way to talk about an action without referring to anybody doing it, right? In the sentence the professor reads, we know that the one doing the action is the professor. In the sentence the students run, the ones doing the action are the students, right? So both of those verbs have subjects, but let's try and talk about those actions without anybody doing it. Instead of the professor reads, I can say to read. To read. Who's doing the action there of reading? Nobody, right? I'm just talking about the action in general. Instead of the students run, I can say to run. And again, who's doing the action? Nobody. I'm just referring to the action in general. So there is a way to use verbs without a subject, right? To talk about an action without anybody doing it, about the action in general. That form of the verb is called the infinitive. And in English, it's quite simple to construct an infinitive. You just put to before the verb, right? Some examples. To fly. Who's flying there? Nobody. I just want to talk about flying in general. To read. To cook. To eat. All of those are infinitives, right? Good. Now I want to talk about a specific verb, still in English. Okay? Remember that example we talked about in a previous slide when I said the coffee is good, and I said that is was our verb, that being is an action in itself. So there is a verb for talking about this action in English, the verb to be. Okay? Notice that I'm using the infinitive to refer to it because that's the way you talk about the action in general, right? That's how you name verbs, to be, with their infinitive. Infinitives are the names of verbs, if you will. Now I also said that conjugating the verb means changing it so that it matches whoever is doing the action, right? There is this neat trick in grammar that we call a conjugation table, which is quite simple. It's just a table that we have designed so that it shows us all the possible forms of a verb, right? I'm going to show you now a conjugation table for the verb to be in English. Okay? It goes like this. I am, you are, he, she, it is, we are, you guys are, they are. What is happening in this table? Well, first, please notice that we have two columns, a left one and a right one, right? Let's talk about the column on the left for a minute. What is going on here? Basically, I have written down here a list of all the possible subjects for the verb, all the possible people or objects even or animals that can do an action, and you know, the action of being is quite broad, right? I can say that a toy is, I can say that an animal is, I can say that the day is. The day is great, right? So anything can be applied to the action of being. So how do I do this? How do I even construct a short list of all possible subjects? Where in language there is this very useful type of word which is a pronoun. It's like these short, very short words that we use for anything in a very general way, right? We say you, right? You, who are you referring to? I don't know, but it's somebody, right? So that's a very general way of referring to somebody. And we can use that for our possible subject. And in that way, we are making this list very brief, right? Same thing with it. What is it? I don't know. Could be an object, could be an animal. I have no idea. But the fact is that we can use that very short word, that pronoun it, for our list of possible subjects. So that's what I'm doing. I'm giving you a list of what is called the personal pronouns. And by making this list, I'm making sure that I'm including everything that can be a subject, right? That's what I have on the left. And what do I have on the right? I have the conjugated forms of the verb to be. What do I mean by that? Well, we just said that conjugating a verb means changing it so that it matches whoever is doing the action, so that it matches its subject, right? So let's think about the first row. It says I am. If you think about it, am is the form of the verb to be that you use exclusively with I. When you want to talk about what you are, right? You yourself, you say I am. If you're trying to speak correct English, you will not say I is or I be, right? Speaking slang, you can do that, of course, and it sounds a little weird, right? But in slang, it sort of flows, but in correct English, it sounds weird, right? You say I am. Am is the correct conjugation of the verb to be for the subject I. But then if I change to you, I have to change it, right? I have to change the to be as well. You are, not you is, not you be, not you am, certainly, right? You are. And then I change it again. He, she, it is, right? We are, you guys are, they are. The verb is changing slightly every time that whoever's doing the action changes. That is conjugating the verb. And this very small table is a conjugation table that shows you all the possible forms of the verb to be. Okay? Now, all of this has been about English. What about Italian? So let's look at a few characteristics of verbs in Italian very quickly. The first is that, just like in English, they have an infinitive. What is the infinitive? Again, it is that form of the verb that we use to talk about the action in general, without anybody actually doing the action. We said that in English, the infinitive starts with to play, to run, to hide, to study, to sleep, right? Infinitives in Italian are slightly different, but you can identify them easily because they always end in one of three ways: are, ere, or ire. Okay? Now, we also said that the most basic action that can be thought about is being, right? In English, for that action, we have the verb to be. The verb we use in Italian is essere. Okay? Let's pronounce that. Essere. Notice that it has a double S there, so let's do it a little longer and with a little pause. Essere, right? Essere. What does essere mean? It means to be, right? It is the infinitive of that verb. Essere means to be. But I know that I have to change it depending on the possible subjects, right? So I'm going to show you a table that is the exact equivalent of what I had in English, but now it's in Italian. Okay? And I'm going to read it, and please repeat after me. Io sono. Tu sei. Lui, lei è. Noi siamo. Voi siete. Loro sono. Ok? Io sono. Tu sei. Lui, lei è. Noi siamo. Voi siete. Loro sono. What does this mean, though? What are we doing here? Don't freak out. We're doing the exact same thing that we did in English. We're taking the verb to be and we're conjugating it, right? So on the left, we have a list of all possible subjects for an action. It's the list of personal pronouns, and it's in the same order that I gave you the English one. So what does io mean? It means I. Io means I. Tu, what does tu mean? You. Attention, you, one person. What do I mean by this? When you say you in English, right, you're late. If you say you're late in English and you think about it, unless you're looking at the person and who they're talking to, you don't know whether they're talking to one person or to several, right? You, the pronoun you in English, is ambiguous. It does not tell you whether you're referring to one person or more than one. Italian does not work like this. Tu is the one you use for only one person. Okay. Then there's lui, which means he, and lei, which means she. There is noi, which means we, voi, which means you guys, or you folks, right? Or y'all. It is the form you use for talking to more than one person, right? And then there's loro, which means they. That is what we have on the left. What do we have on the right? We have the correct forms of the verb essere for each of these. So sono is for io, just like am is for I. Sei is for tu, just like are is for you. E is for lui and lei, just like is for he and she. Siamo is for noi, just like are is for we. Siete is for voi, just like are is for you guys. And sono is for loro, just like are is for they. Notice that essere is changing a lot more than to be, right? Essere has 5 forms, whereas, let me see, actually, yes, 5 forms, whereas to be has 3, right? In general, verbs in Italian change a lot more than in English. In general, they tend to have one specific form for each subject. And what does this whole thing mean? What does io sono mean, guys? Let's think about it for a minute. Is it io means what? It means I, right? And what is that sono thing? That's it. Is the verb essere for io, right? The right form of the verb for I. So io sono means I am. Right? Io sono. If I say io sono Umberto, I mean I am Umberto. Okay? Io sono un professore. I am a professor. Okay? So what does tu sei mean? You are. Again, how many use? One person, just one. Lui è, what does that mean? He is. Lei è means she is. Noi siamo means we are. Voi siete means you guys are. Loro sono means they are. Okay? That's quite simple, I hope, right? All of these facts that I've presented, all of these grammatical terms and stuff, I talked about them because I wanted to introduce this carefully and slowly, but ultimately what matters to me for the purposes of this class is that you know this table and that you know what it means. That you know io sono, that you know that sono goes with io, and that you know that io sono means I am. That you know that sei goes with tu, and that tu sei means you are. That you know that e goes with lui and lei, and lui è is he is, and lei è is she is, and so on and so forth. That's what you need to know. How do you learn this? Well, you have to memorize it somehow. Okay? There are many possible techniques. The one I tend to use just because it, when you study a lot, you start learning how you learn, right? Sort of how your memory works. And my memory works in two ways. I'm very visual, so sometimes I remember things because I remember what they looked like. But I'm also sort of attuned to sound sometimes. I remember what things sound like. So I try to combine those two using the very simple trick of index cards, right? I write these things on an index card. I wouldn't use just one index card for the whole table because I find that the less information I have on the card, the better. So I would write io sono on one card, then tu sei in another, lui è in another, lei è in another, and so on and so forth. I would end up with 7 cards, and then I would just ride the subway and read them constantly to myself, right, in order to memorize this. Whatever technique do you want to use, whether you want to use that one I suggest or another one, it's very important that you learn this by heart, okay? This table of conjugation of the verb essere. And of course, that you remember what it means. We are going to do a lot of things with verbs. In Italian 101, I would say they are the type of word that we're going to study the most, and this is the first one. So it's very, very important that you study and learn this. Okay? Grazie ragazzi. A dopo. See you later.